The year was 2016. The championship had 21 races and 19 were won by Mercedes. Lewis Hamilton, Nico Rosberg, who ended up as champion. Only 2 were won by another team, Red Bull, on that occasion. One with Max Verstappen, his first victory in Spain, and the other with Daniel Ricciardo in Malaysia. At that moment, Formula One possibly experienced its worst moment. It was the end of 𝘾𝙤𝙥𝙮𝙧𝙞𝙜𝙤𝙀's dynasty. The man who envisioned, executed, and built a colossus in the global motorsport league of racing, which, as we always say here, and he mentions, rivals in audience with the Olympics and the World Cup. But at that moment, he was preparing the sale of Formula One to the American group Liberty Media, which still controls things today. And things were going to change a lot, and quickly. And since then, it's no exaggeration to say Formula One exploded. The audience, the revenue, the profit, the interest from advertisers, the interest from teams to join, and from countries to host races. Money coming in from all sides. But how did this happen? Today, continuing from the video about money we made last week, we're going to talk about this phenomenon in detail, which changed everything, and no one can guarantee it won't change. Even more. Sit down. During the 2010s, Formula One was experiencing a slow but continuous decline. The audience had consistently dropped over 7 years, from 2010 to 2016, 2017, by almost a third. In other words, by 2016, 2017, out of every 10 people who watched in 2010, 3.5 no longer watched. The reason? Formula One had become boring. Wait a minute. But you, ADM, saying that Formula One became boring, you who say it has always been like this, that whoever had the best car always won, and so on, and that this category is made of hegemonies, calm down, respect my history. I know exactly what I said in my videos. It wasn't Formula One that changed, it was the audience. Let me explain to you. A large part of the experience of following Formula One from the beginning, 1950 of course, there was no television at the time, but everyone stayed informed, watched in person, etc., was connected to the battle for the championship, following who won, and so on. But in 2015, there was practically no battle. In 2016, there was an internal fight within Mercedes, but you have to agree with me that this greatly reduces the interest. A fight with 2 teams is always more exciting. In 2017, the regulations changed, but Mercedes, even though Ferrari came close, won again and would win in 2018. In 2016, for example, Lewis Hamilton and Nico Rosberg led 82% of the laps in the entire championship, with a large part of those 18% being laps when they had pitted and were about to retake the lead, except for the 2 victories by Red Bull. Only 3 drivers led 97% of the laps. This caused Formula One to lose the interest of the public. But remember, for example, '88. It wasn't much different from what happened in 2015 and 2016. 2015, for example, was very similar to 2011 or 2013, a broad dominance by someone, Vettel in this case. 2016, in turn, was very similar to '88 with Senna and Prost, winning 15 out of 16 races and also leading the vast majority of the laps. But I told you, the audience had changed. Formula One continued to be what it always was, doing what it always did, making money for its owner, but increasingly less. Those who had more money made the best car, took everything. Those who had less money got the crumbs. Those who had no money at all remained at the back, usually doomed to failure and bankruptcy. Well, you've mentioned twice already that the audience changed. What changed? So between 1950 and 1970, most of what was known about Formula One was through radio or print media. From the 70s onward, television arrived, and until 2010, things remained the same. But from then on, the phenomenon of social media truly entered people's lives, especially the younger ones. And Formula One intentionally stayed out of social media. This was a policy of 𝘾𝙤𝙥𝙮𝙧𝙞𝙜𝙤, Uncle Bernie, to those who know him well. Ecclestone is famous for saying, "I don't Worry about the young people because I'm sponsored by UBS Bank or Rolex, and young people don't have money to invest in this bank or to wear this type of watch. This showed the disconnect of a person then over 85 years old from the reality that the future user of fancy watches, important banks, who buys luxury cars, may not have the money today but will in the future, and needs to start watching Formula One in their youth, in childhood. I am from a generation that started watching Formula One at 5 years old, Sunday morning, all that stuff, the 80s, Ayrton Senna, blah, blah, you know. At the end of 2016, Liberty Media bought Formula One from Uncle Bernie for $4.4 billion, immediately bringing a new vision to things. 1, expanding the reach of Formula One to new audiences. 2, and for that, strengthen the digital presence of the category. 3, transform Formula One into a globally attractive spectacle. But wait, wasn't it already global? Globally. Attractive to everyone. Not for the globe, but for the entire society. All strata, men, women, old, young. Then, from 2018 onwards, social media and Drive to Survive come into play with more strength. But Drive to Survive, that series, with good images, but tells stories that aren't really the truth. So take a look. The first step happened during the Formula One preseason in 2017 in Barcelona, when F1 sent all the teams a circular, let's say, a notice, removing the very strict restrictions that Formula One had until then on content production by the teams and drivers within the paddock premises. To understand the importance of this move, we need to go back to the video about Formula One's money and explain. To charge tens of millions of dollars from televisions worldwide, here in Brazil, we estimate it to be between $10 and $12 million, which ban pays. Formula One needs to restrict the production of images within the paddock and filming the cars on the track only to those who have rights to these images and pay. How does it do that? You don't enter the paddock with a phone filming unless you're a very VIP guest. And if someone sees or if someone sees. Ver is the future subjunctive form of the verb ver, to see. Third person singular, he sees. And if someone sees you producing images for professional use, like if I were ever inside the paddock and filmed stories and posted them, someone quickly shows up telling you to take it down. I'm serious. Inside the paddock, your phone needs to be labeled media with permission. So to produce images and the manual of things you have to read, which tells you what you shouldn't and should do, is this thick. By creating this scarcity, they ensure that only those who paid can produce the images. That's why it's very different to go to Stock Car, go to WEC, or go to the Milhas, as I have, and produce images directly from the grid or inside the garages, because there, the restriction is very different. So when Formula One lifted the restrictions on content production by the teams and drivers themselves inside the garages, it was a radical policy change. Shortly after, Red Bull and Mercedes published content on their social media featuring Daniel Ricciardo and Lewis Hamilton, and it was an explosion. None of the materials focused on cars' performance, aerodynamics, or the things that we Formula One nerds enjoy. The drivers were shown as drivers, doing things that humans do, like physical preparation, having a meal, hydrating, before a race or before getting into the car, etc. And the interest was immense. It became evident that people wanted to get to know those characters who were wearing helmets and suits, and we rarely saw their faces. This had already been a challenge for Japanese television. Back in the 80s, when Honda needed to enter Formula One and justify its presence, evidently with advertising for its cars and products on Japanese TV. It was difficult at first to connect the image of Ayrton Senna with that guy in the car. After all, Formula One drivers do not have their faces exposed. It's different from football or basically any other sport where you see the athlete's face. Even in surfing, far away, the drone is filming Medina's face catching a wave. Between 2015 and 2017, the drivers' social media accounts exploded with engagement, following suit and going from tens of thousands of likes to almost millions And most importantly, this had no relation to the driver's success on the track. Even with Daniel Ricciardo's career going downhill from 2019 onwards, he continued to be one of the most important digital personalities in Formula One. This transformation required a quick policy change, but Formula One quickly sensed something important there. When I say Formula One, I obviously mean Formula One under the new management. In 2015, the Formula One Twitter account had, on average, 3 posts per day. By 2017, it was already more active and made 7 posts. And by 2025, this transformation is complete, and on race days, it exceeds 24-hour daily posts. Anyone who works with social media knows that engagement is linked to frequency. Previously, Formula One only posted links to reports on its own website on Twitter. Now, today, it creates content directly on the social network for the social network, posting graphics, videos, comments, articles. A similar investment happened on the category's YouTube channel, with more than double the number of videos being posted annually. Nowadays, 500 per year. I post 880, editing my own videos. The goal was clear: to make people get closer to these characters and their stories. Then, who knows, they might become interested in consuming what they did on the track. You only follow and are interested in knowing more about someone you care about, even if it's just to hate. That's why I've already mentioned here in the past, hate is engagement. But for that, Formula One had to invest and change its production because it had a complete infrastructure on the track, and aerial within the curbs, etc., to show what was happening in the race, but it had to multiply the number of cameras in the pit lane and inside the garages, in the paddock, and even in the stands. And the radio conversation started appearing more and more in the broadcasts, and this was also an essential component in bringing the audience closer to the drivers. Because after all, when you hear what's happening, whether they complain, praise, etc., a connection is established there. Another subtle change happened. If you watch, and there are many on YouTube, races from the 70s, 80s, and 90s, you'll notice that Murray Walker, the legendary English television commentator, spends half the time talking about the classification order. Today, 95% of the time there's a strip here with the classification order and the differences. Data has become part of the broadcast, and it's a flood of data. In 2018 then, for the first time in almost a decade, the Formula One audience responded. And even more promising, the most significant increase happened in a market where Formula One has always struggled, the United States. This transformation, especially there, but among the audience as a whole, remember I mentioned global, must be the drive to survive phenomenon. The series offered the audience, and still offers today, an unprecedented level of access. And figures who perhaps did not have much prominence, like Günther Steiner, a team principal from the back of the grid, or Alexander Albon, a driver who has not achieved much so far, became relatable to people. I'll give you an example from home. My spouse always asks about Alexander Albon because in some past season of Drive to Survive, I can't remember which, they told his story, the trouble his mother had in the past, how she was arrested, etc. And then, you know how it is? People connect with those they care about, even if just a little. The numbers from Drive to Survive are better than any explanation to prove this point. 1.2 million viewers in the United States, 7 million unique viewers worldwide. 1/3 of these people are under 30 years old. And many of these people had never watched a Grand Prix or hadn't seen one in a long time. Oh, Formula One died in 1994, blah, blah. In the United States specifically, the timing was perfect because when Drive to Survive emerged, they also changed the broadcaster to ESPN. And at that time, the United States was such a difficult territory for Formula One that the category gave these rights to the broadcaster almost for free. To give you an idea, it was cheaper than here in Brazil. Today, things have changed, and the values are already quite different. Some say that the next renewal will be around 90 millions per year. The effect of the series, in a cascading manner, brought more advertisers, more public interest, more people attending the races, in Austin in this case, and what was, until then, seen as distant, an eccentric sport for quirky Europeans, started being talked about by people, if not for the races, then for what they posted, for what happened in the series, etc. In summary, what Formula One did to explode in the United States and the rest of the world was to leave the racing to those who care about racing and bring more elements to the forefront. What happens on the track became one of the components sold and broadcasted, and not just the only component. The audience numbers at the United States Grand Prix in Austin proved the point. In 2018, 263,000 people attended the Circuit of the Americas over the 3 days. And in 2022, 444,000. But Liberty didn't stop there and invested in 2 more races in the United States, Miami, and then Las Vegas. 2 of its races, because remember I mentioned in the money video about the Grand Prix promoters and so on? Well, in this case, it's Liberty who organizes the race. And this happens on its own turf. It bought an entire gigantic block in the middle of Las Vegas to build the pit structure, greatly simplifying the licensing process, and plans to organize this race for the first 5, maybe 10 years before handing it over to a third party. Why? Because it knows that in someone else's hands it wouldn't be as it desires, and also a third party might not be willing to invest that much. And the proof that with the changing audience, the coverage had to change. And there isn't exactly a dependency on what happens on the track, at least not for us, the true enthusiasts, is that the audience numbers didn't plummet after a great season in 2021. Arguably the most contested in history, which ended in controversy, and controversy sells. And yes, those numbers continued in 2022, 2023, and 2024, even with the same winner in all 3 years. Max Verstappen in 22, 23, and 24. Yeah, today, the average age of the Formula One audience is considerably lower because many young people have entered the base of the pyramid and the gender distribution has changed radically. You don't need to go to the stands at Interlagos to see this. Until 2015, 8% of the audience, on average, was composed of women, and this number has changed to 40%. Nowadays, I tell you this because I also watch the channel's data changing slowly. The majority is still men, but female participation is increasingly growing. That's why I mentioned earlier, when Formula One didn't change the way of doing things it had been doing for so long, sticking to a proven formula that had worked very well, but at some point was going to become outdated. It saw the audience change, and the audience forced Formula One to have to think of new formulas. And the formula found was, maybe it's not just about race cars going in circles. People care about the characters, so give them the characters. That was then. Another episode of Splash and Go on YouTube. I hope you enjoyed it. Leave a like, it's free, it costs nothing, and it helps a lot. The channel, do me this favor, do this for us. And don't forget to leave us your hype, leave a comment, even if it's just the city where you are watching us from. Why? Because comments, likes, and hype are the fuel for every video. It's what feeds the growth of the channel. And here, we are growing rapidly. I always mention here the power of engagement of this community composed of me making the videos and you watching. After all, we need both ends. Oh, that rhymed. The channel has more likes, hype, and comments than other foreign channels, with 15, 20 times our number of subscribers. Why? Because when I ask you to leave a like, you do. After all, it's free. To not miss out on anything we produces by here, and there are a lot of things that go through our social networks, Instagram, Twitter, Threads, and TikTok. The handles are showing here. The links are down below in the description. And if you want to receive notifications of everything I publish here, the moment the content is released, we also have our notification communities on Instagram, Telegram, and WhatsApp, where you always get an automatic message. All right? So that's it. Thanks, and a big hug.